In March 2011, a GPS navigator, trusted by millions of drivers around the world, would direct a Canadian couple onto a road that doesn't exist in any official database. Albert and Rita planned an ordinary business trip to Las Vegas, but the electronic device would lead them to a place where help wouldn't be available for hundreds of kilometers around. One wrong turn would transform a romantic journey into a fight for survival that would test the boundaries of human faith and endurance. But the most shocking aspect of this story isn't the navigation failure, but the sacrifices a person is willing to make for survival. Albert was the kind of person his neighbors in Penticton called a morning optimist. At 59 years old, he owned a thriving earthworks company, but he lived for simple joys. Every morning began with a joyful shout on the stairs, and every evening ended with a declaration of love to his wife. 38 years of marriage had taught him to cherish everyday moments of happiness. Rita was the opposite of her husband in temperament, but the perfect complement in character. A calm, religious woman at 56 years old, she openly admitted that she didn't like being alone. She rarely traveled without Albert, preferring the company of loved ones over crowds of strangers. The Bible in her backpack wasn't a mere tradition. It was a source of daily strength. In their family, there was an unspoken division of roles, developed over decades of life together. Albert was the source of decisions and energy, ready to take responsibility in any situation. Rita provided stability and emotional support. Their company thrived thanks to his entrepreneurial grit and her practicality. They had achieved the balance that many couples search for their entire lives. Their life in Penticton was measured and successful. Active members of the Nazarene Church, they found meaning in faith and service to the community. Albert ran the business with the enthusiasm of a young entrepreneur. Rita maintained the family hearth and helped with company affairs. Over 38 years of marriage, they had become not just spouses, but a true team. March 2011 brought them the opportunity to combine business with pleasure. A trade show in Las Vegas required the owner's presence, and they had long wanted to visit the city of entertainment. Instead of a boring direct route along highways, they chose a scenic path through the mountains and deserts of the American West. Packing the van took the whole evening. Rita, with the pedantry of an experienced traveler, packed everything necessary. A mix of nuts and candies for snacks, fish oil for health, warm blankets for cold nights, and a small shovel that would later play an important role. The road Bible took its usual place in the upper pocket of the backpack. The navigator had already proven its reliability, flawlessly guiding them through Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. The device inspired complete trust in them. The weather promised to be ideal. Their mood was upbeat, and the upcoming journey promised romance and new experiences. Everything was ready for a trip that was supposed to become one of the best memories of their lives. March 19, 2011, began like an ordinary travel day. Albert and Rita left Penticton early in the morning, following the familiar route across the U.S. border. The GPS confidently led them along the federal highway through the scenic areas of Idaho. Mountain landscapes gave way to valleys, and the device counted down the kilometers to the next turn with mechanical precision. The mistake happened in the mountain home area, Idaho. Instead of continuing along the main highway, Albert turned onto a local road toward Mountain City, Nevada. Perhaps he was distracted by a conversation with his wife. Perhaps he misunderstood the navigator's instruction. Either way, this turn added 290 kilometers and 3 hours of extra travel to their route. When the navigator recalculated the route and suggested a shortcut through a forest road to the main highway leading straight to the city of Jackpot in Nevada, the decision seemed logical. Why take a detour through Wells if the navigator showed a more direct path? Albert turned off the paved highway onto a dirt road in the Humboldt-Toiyabe National Forest. The first kilometers inspired confidence. The road was narrow but quite passable. The landscapes became wilder and more beautiful. Snow still lay on the mountain peaks, but below, a spring atmosphere reigned. Nothing foreshadowed problems until the road began to noticeably deteriorate. The road led through the Jarbidge Wilderness, one of the most remote places in the continental United States. Asphalt quickly gave way to dirt. Then the real problem began. Potholes filled with spring mud, washed out sections with deep ruts. The Chevrolet Astrovan without four-wheel drive began to skid on wet patches. After 9 kilometers of such driving, Rita voiced what both were already thinking. The situation looks wrong. The road had turned into a narrow track between rocks and bushes. No other cars were in sight, and the GPS continued to confidently show the direction. The catastrophe happened in a low area where spring rains had turned the section into a mud trap. Albert tried to drive carefully, but the wheels began to spin in the viscous mud. The more he pressed the gas, the deeper the van sank into the quagmire. The first attempts to free it took several hours. Albert rocked the car between gears. Rita placed rocks under the wheels. They dug the mud with a small shovel. They even managed to temporarily free the van and drive a few meters. Hope flared brightly, but the Astro fell into an even deeper hole. This time, no efforts helped. The van was stuck fast in the mud, 300 meters from the nearest normal road. By the evening of March 19th, it became clear that they couldn't get out on their own. The first night in the stuck van became a test of their optimism. Albert was more anxious than Rita had seen him in years of marriage. Usually calm and self-confident, he paced around the car, repeatedly assessing the situation. But the van was stuck solid. Rita tried to calm him. It was late and they were tired. She suggested postponing attempts until morning. But reality was harsh. They were far from civilization without cell service, and their food supplies weren't meant for a long stop. The temperature dropped below zero at night. Together, they knelt beside the van and prayed, "Lord, what should we do?" Tears mixed with the spring fog. They understood they had made a mistake by trusting the GPS, but there were no mutual reproaches. On the morning of March 20th, Albert climbed the nearest hill with his mobile phone. For a few seconds, he managed to catch a weak signal and call 911. He had time to transmit approximate coordinates, but the connection broke and didn't restore. They spent the second night in the van, wrapped in blankets and hoping that help was on the way. The morning of March 22nd brought the realization that they could wait for help indefinitely. 3 days in the trap had taught them to realistically assess the situation. Food supplies were limited. The fuel in the tank would last at most a few days for heating, and spring nights in the Nevada mountains were cold. Albert made a decision that forever divided their fates. One of them had to go for help while the other stayed with the van and supplies. Alternatives were discussed briefly. Rita suffered from knee pain that limited her mobility. Albert, at 59, remained in good physical shape and could walk 10 kilometers to Mountain City over rough terrain. Going together meant abandoning the van with supplies and risking both lives in unfamiliar territory. Staying together meant slow death from hunger and cold without guarantee of being found. Albert's decision to go alone was logical, but no less painful. Preparation for the hike took little time. Albert took a backpack, the GPS device that was supposed to lead him to Mountain City, and minimal provisions, leaving most of the supplies for Rita. They agreed that she would wait in the van, rest, and try to distract herself somehow. The farewell was agonizing. They prayed together, asking God for protection and wisdom. Albert hugged his wife and said the familiar words, "I love you." These words had been spoken every day of their marriage, but now they carried special weight. Rita tried to be strong, understanding that her tears would only make Albert's departure harder. In the morning fog of March 22nd, Albert set course northeast toward Mountain City. The GPS showed a direct path through mountains and canyons. He walked confidently, looking back and waving until the fog swallowed his silhouette. Rita was left alone in the stuck van in the middle of the vast American West Desert. In her stock were a few handfuls of nuts, some candies, and faith that her husband would return with help. But hours passed, and there were no signs of return. The first days of solitude Rita met with thorough organization. A woman who didn't like being alone, even in a crowd, found herself forced to create a survival system in complete isolation. Structuring the day became her salvation from panic and despair. Every morning began with prayer. Rita opened the road Bible and read a prayer that became her spiritual anchor. "Preserve my soul, O Lord, for I am godly. Save your servant." These words gave her strength to face a new day of uncertainty. Rationing food required iron discipline. Rita poured her daily portion of the nut mix into her palm, 1 tablespoon, to which she added 1 candy and a fish oil tablet. The entire daily ration fit in 1 handful, but she stretched it over the whole day. Water procurement became a daily ritual and the main salvation in their catastrophe. Incredible luck. Just a few dozen meters from the van ran a clean mountain stream. Without this source, Rita would have died in 3 days, like any person without water. Twice a day, she forced herself to overcome the knee pain and descend to the water. Rita scooped the icy mountain water with plastic bottles and mugs found in the van, filling all available containers. The water was crystal clear and so cold that it numbed her fingers. But this was the only resource she didn't limit herself on. Keeping a diary became a way to maintain connection with reality and the last hope for rescue. Rita methodically recorded the coordinates of Albert's route, noted each day of her confinement, fixed changes in her well-being and the weather. These entries were meant to become her last message to the family if she didn't survive. For possible rescuers, Rita left a note on the dashboard, where every word was chosen with desperate precision. Help. Stuck March 19, 2011. Husband went for help to Mountain City. Didn't return. She rewrote this note several times, making the handwriting clearer, adding the date, so that a random passerby would immediately notice it and understand the scale of the tragedy if she happened to be asleep. The diary and note became her way to scream for help in the absolute silence of the American wilderness, where no one could hear her. For the first 2 weeks, Rita maintained relative activity. She walked to the stream, kept order in the van, prayed, and hoped to hear the sound of her returning husband. Albert was a strong man, and if anyone could bring help, it was him. While Rita created a survival routine in the Nevada mountains, another drama began in Canada. At the end of March, their son Raymond Crétin became worried when his parents didn't appear at the trade show in Las Vegas and didn't get in touch. Albert was a punctual businessman who never missed important business meetings without warning. Raymond contacted the police and began reaching out to American authorities. By early April, it became clear that Albert and Rita Crétin had disappeared somewhere in the vast American West. The family knew of their plans to visit Las Vegas via a scenic route, but the exact details of the path were unknown. Coordination of the searches was taken over by the sheriff of Elko County, Nevada. Sergeant David Prawl organized search teams using data on the couple's last known movements. Albert's brief call to 911 provided approximate coordinates, but the search area covered hundreds of square kilometers. The humble Toiyabe National Forest presented enormous challenges for the search operation. Spring weather added problems. Fog limited visibility for helicopters, mud made roads impassable, and snow blocked access to high-altitude areas. Local residents joined the searches as volunteers. Bill Landon and other residents of Mountain City knew every trail in the area, but even their experience couldn't compensate for the scale of the territory. "These mountains are treacherous," Landon told journalists. "The mud here is knee-deep, and when it rains, the roads turn into swamps." The story of the missing Canadian couple attracted media attention. Canadian TV channels began covering the searches, and American publications picked up the story of the tourists heading to Las Vegas who had vanished. The church community in Penticton organized prayer meetings for Albert and Rita. But while rescue services combed the forests, Rita slowly weakened in her mud trap. By the end of the first month, her daily ration of 100 to 200 calories began to seriously affect her physical condition. By the 5th week of April, weight loss approached 10 kilograms, and every step to the stream became torturous. Search teams continued to work, but unsuccessfully. Time worked against everyone. Against Rita, who was slowly dying of hunger. Against Albert, whose fate remained unknown. And against the rescuers, who were searching for a needle in a haystack the size of an entire state. May 6, 2011, became the 49th day of Rita Crétin's ordeal. She woke up with the understanding that her body could no longer withstand constant starvation. Over 7 weeks, she had lost 13 kilograms, turning from a healthy, middle-aged woman into an emaciated shadow of herself. The attempt to reach the stream for water nearly became her last. Rita barely made it to the familiar spot, but the return path required superhuman effort. She literally crawled up the slope, stopping every few meters. Chest pain and rapid heartbeat indicated that her body was beginning to fail. Reaching the van, Rita realized, this is the end. For the first time in the entire ordeal, she allowed herself to think of death not as a distant possibility, but as a near reality. With her remaining strength, Rita tidied herself up, as if preparing for her final journey. She neatly folded the diary with entries from all the days of the ordeal, placed notes for rescuers in prominent places so that whoever found her body would understand what had happened here. Wrapped in a blanket on the back seat of the van, she felt a strange peace. Rita recited a childhood prayer she had learned as a child. Lord, as I lay me down to sleep, I pray thee my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray thee my soul to take. These simple words, repeated by millions of children before bed, now took on a prophetic meaning. For the first time in 49 days of struggle, Rita was ready to let go of life, not from despair, but from deep acceptance of God's will. A strange calm filled her heart. 49 days of struggle were coming to an end, but she felt no fear or bitterness. The faith that had sustained her all this time allowed her to accept her fate with dignity. Rita closed her eyes and sank into a sleep that could be her last. 2 hours later, she was awakened by the sound of engines. At first, she thought it was a hallucination, but the sound of ATVs became clearer. The instinct for survival overpowered exhaustion. Rita found the strength to stand and exit the van. 3 people on ATVs appeared from around the bend in the road, like a vision from another world. Chet and Whitney Herman, along with Father Troy, were searching for elk antlers in this wilderness when they noticed something incredible. A minivan stuck in the middle of the mud in a place where there shouldn't be a single living soul. The hunters were local residents who knew every kilometer of these places, but they had never seen anything like it. The van looked like a spaceship that had fallen from the sky. When an emaciated woman emerged from it, more like a skeleton covered in skin, they realized they were witnessing a miracle. "We're stupid Canadians," Rita whispered in a voice that was barely audible. Every word came to her with difficulty. "The navigator led us here and we got stuck. My husband went for help more than a month ago. He's strong, he's a fighter." Even on the brink of death, in the moment of her own incredible rescue, her thoughts were only about Albert. Chet Herman looked at this woman and couldn't believe his eyes. 49 days alone in the American wilderness, and she was alive. Chet immediately contacted emergency services via radio. A medical service helicopter headed to the rescue coordinates. By the evening of May 6th, Rita Cretien was in the medical center in Twin Falls, receiving the first professional medical help in 49 days. Rita was rescued, but the question of Albert's fate remained unanswered. Where was he? Was he alive? Would the rescue services be able to find him now that they had the exact coordinates of his route? In the Twin Falls Hospital, Rita became a medical miracle. Dr. James Westbury, in 20 years of practice, had seen nothing like it. The woman had lost 13 kilograms in 49 days, almost a quarter of her body mass. Her daily ration was less than 200 calories, while her body expended at least 1,200. Medical literature describes only isolated cases of survival under such extreme starvation for longer than a month. Most people die after 30 to 40 days without food. Rita lasted 49 days, preserving clarity of mind and the ability to move. By all medical canons, she should have died from multi-organ failure, but her heart was beating, her kidneys were working, her brain was functioning. Doctors couldn't explain how the body of a 56-year-old woman endured such exhaustion and remained viable. Intravenous nutrition was administered cautiously. Drips with glucose and electrolytes restored the water-salt balance. Chest pain and labored breathing turned out to be symptoms of cardiovascular stress from exhaustion, but without critical violations. Rita recovered quickly. Her consciousness remained clear. Her psychological state was remarkably stable. Instead of traumatic stress, doctors observed a woman with deep inner strength who accepted her rescue as a gift from above. Raymond Cretien flew to Idaho as soon as he received news of his mother's rescue. The meeting in the hospital room was full of tears of relief and anxiety for Albert's fate. Rita handed over to the rescue services all the entries from her diary, including the GPS coordinates of her husband's route and the exact time of his departure. For days later, Rita was discharged for further recovery at home in Penticton. The prognosis was optimistic. Her body demonstrated a remarkable ability to recover. Rita's rescue gave new impetus to the search for Albert. Detective Jim Carpenter from the Elko County Sheriff's Office received exact data on the time and direction of his departure. The GPS coordinates from Rita's diary allowed them to significantly narrow the search zone and focus efforts on the route between the stuck van and Mountain City. On May 7, 2011, the largest search operation in the history of this area began. Sheriff Jim Pitt allocated 20 employees and equipment, including mounted patrols, high-passability ATVs, and helicopters with thermal imaging equipment. Local volunteers, familiar with every canyon and trail, joined the official groups. The first weeks of searches yielded several false hopes. Helicopter pilots reported spotted objects that, upon closer inspection, turned out to be natural formations or debris from other tourists. Search dogs picked up the scent several times but lost it on rocky sections or in areas washed out by spring streams. By the end of May, it became clear that Albert had not followed a direct path to Mountain City. Ground teams found no traces of his passage along the assumed route. Albert had lost his way in the fog and snow. The winter of 2011 to 2012 forced the suspension of active searches. The official operation was curtailed, but local hunters and tourists received photographs of Albert and descriptions of his gear. The family didn't lose hope that someone would stumble upon traces of the missing Canadian. On October 30th, 2012, that hope was fulfilled in a tragic way. Rodney Thompson and Jay Doak, elk hunters from Elko City, were ascending the slope of Mount Merritt when they noticed a backpack neatly placed in a visible spot among the rocks at an altitude of missing number in original, but implied high altitude. A few meters from the backpack, under the protection of a large tree, lay the remains of Albert Crétin, a fully preserved skeleton in clothing with a blanket and personal items nearby. The wallet with documents allowed immediate identification of the remains. Albert had climbed Mount Merritt, possibly trying to find a better view of the terrain or cell service, but got lost in the snow and fog. The forensic examination determined the cause of death as a combination of exhaustion and hypothermia. He died within the first week after leaving the camp, between March 25th and 30th, 2011. The position of the body and the placement of the backpack indicated that he maintained clarity of mind until the end. News of the discovery of Albert's body reached the family on October 31st, 2012. Henry Crétin, the deceased's brother, spoke at a press conference on behalf of the family. "We had long come to the conclusion that Albert was already in heaven. Now we have an understanding of his last day here on earth. Now we have consolation and closure. We say, praise the Lord." For Rita, the discovery of the body became painful but necessary closure to an 18-month period of uncertainty. "I think I really accepted his death a long time ago, but this was very important. Finally knowing what exactly happened to him," she confessed to journalists. The most important thing for her was knowing that Albert died peacefully under the protection of a tree, and that his body was not harmed by wild animals. The circumstances of her husband's death did not evoke bitterness or accusations in Rita. Albert had traveled an incredible path over rough terrain in an attempt to save them both. Detective David Prawl noted the bravery of the deceased. "Mr. Crétin showed incredible courage by setting out through the mountains to save his wife." For Rita, this was not a failure, but a heroic attempt worthy of the memory of their marriage. Rita continued to drive the same Chevrolet Astro that had been extracted from the mud trap by rescue services. This symbolic gesture showed her refusal to be broken by circumstances. The van that nearly became her grave turned into a reminder of the strength of the human spirit. The main legacy of Albert and Rita Crétin's story became a testament to the power of love and faith. Daily declarations of love, willingness to sacrifice life to save a companion, the ability to find meaning and hope in the darkest circumstances. Albert started every day with a joyful shout on the stairs, expressing joy at the simple fact of existence. This joie de vivre and love for life did not die with him in the Nevada mountains, but continued to live in Rita's memory and in those who learned their story. The story of Albert and Rita makes us think about things we prefer not to notice in everyday life. How dependent are we on technology? GPS guides us every day, but are we ready for the moment when it fails us? How many of us check routes on maps or consult with locals? But the main question of this story is much deeper. What are you willing to do for the most precious person? Could you, like Albert, go into the unknown, knowing you might not return? Or, like Rita, wait 49 days in complete solitude, believing in the impossible? Write in the comments what you think about this story. Do you condemn the couple for trusting the navigator or sympathize with their tragedy? If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Ahead are many more incredible stories about what a person is capable of in extreme conditions. Thank you for watching and see you in the next episodes.